So if you watched yesterday's Introduction to NX video, you're probably thinking, big deal. So you made a surface. Who cares? Well, let's dig a little bit deeper into what we've accomplished so far and focus on the power and flexibility of building surfaces in this particular way. Now, before we go any further with that, I want to take a look at a few more interface tricks. First of all, let's click on this little gear icon right below the NX icon on the toolbar manager and select Collapse. This lets us get away with only the bare essentials on our screen. We have access to every tool in NX via the menu bar drop-down that we've already looked at. And we have access also to all of the toolbar manager tabs from the All Toolbars drop-down, which is actually a really handy way to get to those. And this is my favorite way to work. If you prefer the full toolbar, please feel free to click on that gear widget and select Expand if you want to bring it back. Finally, you may find that sometimes you want to have tighter control over the middle mouse viewport rotation. First, you may want to control the center of rotation. The quickest way to temporarily change the center of rotation is to simply hold the middle mouse button over a piece of geometry until the blue crosshairs appear, at which time you'll be able to temporarily rotate about that point. To set a persistent rotation point, right-click on the background of the viewport and select Rotation Point, or Set Rotation Point, from the menu. Then you can click a piece of geometry to set a persistent rotation point. And to go back to the default rotation, just right-click on that background again and choose Clear Rotation Point. Finally, there may be times when you want to rotate about an axis in particular. So by clicking on any one of the axes in the viewport rotation indicator at the bottom left, we can select that axis, and then when we rotate in the viewport, it's only going to rotate about that axis, which is actually kind of nice. To go back to full 3D rotation, all we have to do is click on the sphere at the center of the same indicator, and now we're back to normal rotation. The second big bullet point of the day is that everything we've built so far is quote-unquote associative. Put succinctly, this means that if we change any piece of geometry, all of its children will update accordingly. For example, if we double-click on our associative studio spline, the dialog reappears and we're able to make changes to the curve. Now, for those of you who are already accustomed to working with NURBS curves, it may interest you to know that if we go up to the Analyze Shape part in our toolbar manager, we can select the Curve Analysis Combs option to toggle on a nice curvature analysis of our curve here so that we can see how we're affecting the curvature of our curve in real time. Once again, we can click anywhere on the spline to add more spline points if we want to get tighter control over our curve. And when we're done, we can just click OK. Thus far, we've been interacting with our geometry solely in the 3D viewport, but there is another way. If we go up to the Toolbar Manager, down to Resource Bar, and over to the Part Navigator, this gives us a list of every associative element in our model, listed in the order in which it was created. The order is very important, as we'll discover later. And as you can see, selecting an item in the Part Navigator selects its counterpart in the 3D viewport. Double-clicking an item in the tree allows you to edit that item, the same as double-clicking it in the viewport. If you prefer to see your geometry update in real time as you make adjustments to your curves, you may want to head up to the menu bar, Preferences, Modeling, look in the Update panel, make sure that Dynamic Update is set to Continuous, and that Dynamic Children is set to All Levels. Click OK. And now when we go to edit our studio spline this time, instead of double-clicking or selecting Edit with Rollback, which is what double-clicking does, then we could right-click and just jump up to Edit Parameters. This keeps the surface showing, and now we're able to adjust our curve and see its result on the final surface in real time. Very powerful. Now with complex models, this will become prohibitively slow, but with simple situations like this, it is very convenient. And finally, on to the third and final point for the day. I told you before that this isn't just any old swept surface. This is a clean, perfect, Class A quality surface. Let me explain. First of all, let's take a look at the topology of this surface. We can select it, go up to the Toolbar Manager, down to Analyze Shape, and Show Poles. Now, then we can hit Escape to drop the selection, and the first thing you should notice is that each rib along our sweep contains exactly 4 control points, which is the bare minimum required to create this shape. If we head to the top view, notice that the points on each rib are perfectly aligned to one another, perpendicular to the curvature of the spine curve. I promised in the last video that we'd talk about spine curves at length, and we might as well start that discussion now. So if you recall, when we defined this surface, we chose the studio spline as our spine curve. Now we can see the result of that decision. The ribs of the surface are always normal to or perpendicular to the spine. This gives us incredible control of our surface. So, for example, let's hop up to the Toolbar Manager, Lines and Arcs, over to Line Point XYZ, zoom out a little bit, and then I'm going to draw a line from the center bottom of our surface straight up to the top of the surface. Hit the Escape key to drop the tool, and notice over in the Part Navigator that the line we've just created exists after the section surface that we created before. So I'd like to use this new curve as the spine for our section surface, but you'll notice that if I double-click the section surface, the line is no longer available to me to click. It has disappeared. This is because the line was created after the sweep and as such is not available at that point in the history tree. To make it available, all we need to do is cancel this dialog box, hop over to the Part Navigator, and drag the line so that it exists before the section surface. Now, if we double-click the section surface, that line is available to us. So if I go over to the section surface dialog box in the spine curve parameter, I just select that, come up here, and shift-click on the studio spline to deselect it so that we no longer have a spine curve selected. And then I can come up and select the straight line to use as our new spine. I can now click OK and look at the result. Notice that the ribs of the surface are now in a perfectly straight line because they are all perpendicular or normal to our new perfectly straight spine curve. Now, taking advantage of spine curves gives us an incredible amount of control over the quality of the end surface, not to mention its shape. So when we select the surface, hop up to Toolbar Manager, Analyze Shape, and over to Face Analysis Radius, we can see that the curvature, select that, click Apply. We can see that the curvature of this surface is perfect all the way across its length. There are no wobbles or curvature inversions, and if you look at the ends, there's no bunched up geometry at the ends of the sweep. So now let's clean up our view a little bit. First of all, I'm going to right-click in the viewport and drag straight up to bring us to Shaded with Edges mode, which basically disables our analysis. Then select the surface here, go up to the Toolbar Manager, down to Analyze Shape, and turn off Show Poles so we don't have to look at that. Now I'm going to go up to the Toolbar Manager, Curve Tools, down to Intersection Curve, and for the first face I want to select the surface that we've just created, hit the middle mouse button. Now let's rotate around and select the ZX plane as the second surface. And now we can see that we've created an intersection curve right along that plane. Click OK, select the curve, go up to the Toolbar Manager again, down to Analyze Shape, and turn on the Curve Analysis combs for our new intersection curve. Now we can see that the geometry is perfectly smooth and perfectly convex with no wobbles or inflections. This is the beauty of conics. By definition, a conic can mathematically never have wobbles or inflections. We can adjust the sharpness of the surface by editing its parameters and editing the rho value to a value between 0.01, which is extremely flat, and 0.99, which is extremely sharp. Now notice that even, if I click OK here, even with these extreme values, tangency is maintained and the quality of the surface remains perfect. You can see that our analysis graph is still showing a perfectly smooth surface. If we really want to be fancy, we can even vary the rho value across the length of the sweep using a law function. So if we simply double-click the feature and set the rho law type to linear, then we can set a start and end value. So maybe 0.5 at one end and 0.9 at the other. We don't need to eyeball anything. We can know for certain that this surface is perfect and that it is perfectly smooth on this side and very sharp on the other side with a linear variation between.